Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing really well. Welcome to my channel if you're new here, welcome back if you're not. In this little corner of the internet, we're talking about books and literature. I wanted to thank you for the nice comment that you left in my previous video, which was the Booktube newbie tag. The Booktube community is so lovely and so welcoming, so yeah, I'm really excited for this journey and to share more content. So today I wanted to share with you a list of 50 books that I would like to read that I consider as must-reads. They based on a list done by the BBC, a study that they done on the British population. That list been shared by a friend of mine, and I've been following this list for like maybe 2 years. They're mainly classics. What I want to say is it's mainly English and American novels. There is 2 French books and 1 Russian, so very Western oriented literature. Obviously, as a disclaimer, I also read a lot of translated fiction because I love to learn more about different culture and different countries. This list is really to help me understand every Western references in literature, in cinema, in music, and in pop culture in general. I will leave in the description the study by the BBC, and I will share with you the books that I already read, my opinion on those books, and the books that I would like to reread. Let's start now. So we're starting strong because I read the first book in this list, which is 1984, written in 1949. If you see me looking down, it's because there is my laptop. Some of the book I haven't read, so I can't really talk about them if I didn't read them. So I have my notes here. But yeah, 1984, written in 1949. It's basically the story of what would happen if we gave total control to our government. And in this book, the government is Big Brother. I had mixed feeling about it. I gave it 3 stars because I really enjoyed the beginning, and then I think George Orwell really lost me when the main character Smith is reading a book by Godwin. So boring, that part. And then the ending was better. I loved the plot twist, but it didn't really made up for the boring part. I really preferred Animal Farm by George Orwell, which I'm talking about in my January wrap-up. I don't think it's his best work, but anyway, I read it, so quite happy with that. Second book in this list is A Bend in the River by V.S. Naipaul, written in 1979. It's a commentary about colonialism and the consequences of the European after they fled Africa. We mainly following the main character called Salim, who is trying to rebuild himself more than once after the departure of the European colonists out of Africa. So that's going to be very interesting to see what they left, what kind of life the Africans had to rebuild after this main part of history. Next in this list is Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which is one of his most favorite masterpieces. I haven't read A Christmas Carol. I know the story. It's a story of Scrooge, who is haunted by his former partner. I don't remember the name of his partner. Basically, Scrooge lost the spirit of Christmas with that night and the ghost. He will understand the real meaning of Christmas and what it means. It's a similar story as the Grinch, I would say. But yeah, I haven't read it, but I know the story. But I will read it at some point. Next is A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, written in 1984. I read Morris by E.M. Forster, which I adore. I think his writing was amazing, and the storytelling as well was good. The characters were really well developed. I haven't read A Passage to India. Apparently it's gonna be also a reflection on Forster's visit to India in 1912 and his duration as a private secretary in India. It's gonna be interesting to see the relationship between the British Allies and the Indian underclass. Sounds very dark, but exciting to read that because I loved Morris, so I'm very excited to give it a go. Next, Alice in Wonderland. Alice Adventures in a Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I read this book in French when I was a kid. I had mixed feeling about it. I remember I was like, yeah, I don't really understand. Maybe I need to be high to understand that book. Apparently, many believe that the whole book is an allegory to drug use, which there is no evidence that Lewis Carroll actually consumed illicit drugs during his lifetime, so we will never know, but that would make a lot of sense. Then next, Anna Karenina. So this is the only Russian book in this list. I read a third of the book 2 years ago, and then I moved house, and I never carried on reading it, so I feel like now I need to read it from scratch. It's a big boy, so I don't know when I'm gonna go through this book, but we're basically following the story of an affair from between Anna, wife of Alexei Karenin, and basically Count Vronsky, a young bachelor. So I remember that there were a lot of spice in this book, so yeah, I'm quite excited to get back to it and finish finally the book. Next in this list is A Bird Song by Sebastian Faulks. I never read this book. It was written in 1993, so quite recent, my year. It's a family saga with following two main characters living at a different time. The first is Stephen Racefor, a British soldier at the front line in Amiens during the First World War, so in France. And the second is his granddaughter, Elizabeth Benson, whose 1917 plotline follow her attempt to recover an understanding of Stephen's experience of the war. Oh, okay. So I really like war novels. Quite excited to get through that one too. Then next to the list is Brave New World, which is a science fiction dystopian novel written in 1932, so one of the first one, I guess. The plot is a warning to all that advanced technology could take over and humans could lose their humanity. Okay, so maybe the robot's gonna take over, who knows, but very excited to read also sci-fi classics, which there is few in this list. So next in this list is Catch-22, written by Joseph Heller in 1961. So I don't really know much about Catch-22, and I feel it's like the kind of book that I don't really want to know, so I didn't look up to any plot for this one. The only thing I know is that the book has been banned because apparently there is a really inappropriate language, and there is like profanity in this book, so it gives me even more will to read it anytime soon. Then next we have the Dark Material saga. So there is 3 books, the Northern Lights, the Amber Spyglass, and the Subtle Knife. I don't know if in that order, maybe not. I read the first books when I was a kid, and I don't know why I didn't carry on, because I really enjoyed the first one, so definitely worth a reread. We're following basically Lyra, she's in Oxford, and then she's leaving for a journey to the north to find her friend Roger, who disappeared, who's been kidnapped by those naughty people. And there is like the whole story, it's like a fantasy. There is this whole story about the dust, which has like magical power. Excited to read that. I love fantasy, and I remember really enjoying the first book, so yeah, I will definitely read that. Next in this list we have Don Quixote by Cervantes, written in 1605. This book is considered as one of the first Western novel, I guess, and it's often labeled as a founding work of Western literature, and we're following that main character Don Quixote, and it's a parody of romantic chivalry. Very excited to read that. I mean, it's a big boy once again, so I don't know when I'm gonna get through this one, but definitely in this list. Then another book that I read is Frankenstein. I read that last year, and now it's one of my favorite classic ever. I think it was brilliant, written by Mary Shelley in 1818. Just brilliant. we're following the story of Dr. Victor Frankenstein, which Frankenstein is not the name of the creator, but the doctor who created the creator and who created that creator and then just give him shit, basically. It's a whole story about humanity and caring about people. Really enjoyed it. Will recommend 10 out of 10 for me. Next, we have Gulliver's Travel by Jonathan Swift, written in 1726. I didn't know that it was that old. The books follow the voyage of Gulliver as he ventures to uncharted region of the world where to find new civilization and encounter fantastical beings. Okay, it's a journey in the world, like meeting different people and different fantastical creature. Yeah, I'm excited for that. Then we have a Hamlet from William Shakespeare, which is my current read, which it's very funny. We're following the story of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark, who is visited by the ghost of his father, who's been killed by his brother, so Hamlet uncle, who is the new king, and basically is a story of revenge. Shakespeare is quite difficult to read in English, so I read them mainly in French. I'm currently reading it, so I don't really have an opinion yet about it, but you will see that in my next reading wrap-up for sure. Next in this list we have Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad, written in 1899. This one I didn't know at all what it was about. Apparently it's various European powers are exploiting Africa for its riches and resources while leaving little or nothing to the Africans who are laboring under them. Conrad shows the horror of colonialism and concludes that the European, not the African, are the true savages. Apparently it's a hard book to read as well. The writing style is very difficult, but I think it's been done on purpose because Conrad really wanted to make it as a journey, like the reader is fighting through the jungle to read this book. So yeah, very exciting and very intimidated actually. Next we have the Harry Potter books, which I'm not gonna introduce here. I love the Harry Potter books. I read them several times, so I'm rereading them with my friend Lorinda, rereading them and annotating them. So I annotate the book and then I give it to her and she annotates, so it's like a delayed conversation that we're having, and I've been loving it. Reread Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. My favorite is Order of the Phoenix. I love the Half-Blood Prince as well, and Prison of Azkaban, so I'm really excited to carry on this journey. Next in the list is Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, written in 1884, and is telling the point of view of Huck Finn, a very literate teen who fakes his own death to escape his abusive drunken father. He meets a runaway slave named Jim, and the two embark on a rough journey down the Mississippi River. Okay, so I think Jim, he's a character in Tom Sawyer. I'm more familiar with Tom Sawyer with the cartoon when I was younger, but I think both stories are quite linked. I think even Huckleberry Finn is in the story of Tom Sawyer. It's a commentary on race relations in a world where slavery was still considered as appropriate. I'm very curious to read about that. I remember loving Tom Sawyer when I was younger, so I'm pretty sure that's going to be quite different and quite a dark read, but I'm keen to read that. Then next we have Inferno by Dante, which is the first part of the Italian writer Dante's Divine Comedy, and we're following basically Dante, guided by the poet Virgil, through the ninth circle of hell, where he eventually arriving in the center where Satan, so the devil, is living. That's gonna be a very, very dark read as well, I guess. Some of them are describing it as very romantic, which I'm curious to see where is the romanticism in this, but who knows. Then next we have Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I read this book maybe 7 years ago, so I'm worth a reread now. I loved it. I think the character of Jane is such a strong feminine character in British literature. I remember really loving the story in general. Yeah, I need to reread it because my memories are mainly about the film and not the book, and I remember that the book had way more details, and I love the writing style of Charlotte Bronte. Next we have Life of Pi by Ian Martel. I read this last year, I think, so I've seen the show in London, the West End play that I really love. I've seen the film written by Ian Martel, who is Canadian and Indian. I have mixed feeling again on that book. I think the story was interesting, and the fact that you have two interpretation of the characters, that was really clever. But I think the religion aspect is talking a lot about religion in this book, and at some point I was like, I don't care at all. We gave it 3 stars, I think. Next we have The Lord of the Rings by Tolkien. So I'm very familiar with the films. I read the book. I read The Hobbit quite a while ago, again in French, and I remember Tolkien writing was already quite difficult in French, but I was way younger. I'm excited to get through The Lord of the Ring, especially like I want to be able to get through book 1 this year, Fellowship of the Ring, and then if I'm motivated, maybe The Two Tower and The Return of the King, but at least book 1 would be an achievement for me. Next we have Lord of the Flies, which is my most recent read, so we will have my opinion on this book in the March wrap-up, which was a good read. I'm not gonna spoil my opinion, but the plot concerns a group of British boys who are stranded in an island, and a disastrous attempt to govern themselves. The novel theme include morality, leadership, and the tension between civility and chaos. I really enjoyed it. I'm not gonna tell more. Then we have Memoir of a Geisha, written by Arthur Goldston, written in 1997, so quite recent, modern classic, I would say. And we're following the story of Nita Sayuri and the many trials she faced on the path of becoming and working as a geisha in Kyoto in Japan before, during, and after World War II. I think there is a film out of this book, and a lot of people recommended that film to me, so very excited to go through this one. Then we have Men Without Women by Ernest Hemingway, which we should not mix up with Murakami's book from the same name. I think this one is 14 short story collection. I love Hemingway. I think he's a brilliant writer. My favorite is Farewell to Arms. I don't know about short stories. I'm not the biggest fan, but I said this year I want to read more of things that I don't usually read, so get out of my comfort zone, I guess. Next we have Moby Dick by Herman Melville, which I think is the most challenging book in this list. It was written in 1851, and it's following the story of Ishmael, who lost his legs with a fight with a whale called Moby Dick. And basically the story it's a revenge story. I don't know if I want to read that, but at some point I think I need to. It's if I really want to understand those references on Moby Dick in popular culture, for me the most challenging one in this list. Then we have Money by Martin Amis, which is the story of that guy, John Self, a successful director of commercial, who is invited to New York City by Fielding Goodney, a film producer, to shoot his first film. So this is a book when we're gonna talk about money, capitalism. I mean, my friend Charlie said that it's a very straight white man book, so yeah, very curious to know what it's all about. Then we halfway through the list, we have On the Road by Jack Kerouac, written in 1957, and it's based on Kerouac's and his friend travel across the United States. I tried to read that book a while ago. I read 2 pages and then I was like, oh, this sounds so boring, but it's actually one of my friend's favorite books. So at some point, I think I need to really to understand why he loved that book so much. Not that excited to read that book, to be honest. Next, we have One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, written in 1962, and exploring the idea of what it means to be sane or insane, and more importantly, who gets to define what qualifies to be insane versus sane. Very intrigued by that plot and the idea in general behind this story. So yeah, this is really high priority in my list, I guess. Next, we have Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, which is my favorite Jane Austen. So I read that a few years ago, so I'm worth a reread now. So yeah, we're following the story of Elizabeth Bennet and Fitzwilliam Darcy, rich aristocrats. I'm not going to tell more. I think everyone know more or less the story of Pride and Prejudice, but yeah, my favorite Jane Austen, and I really want to reread that one. Next, we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I love Daphne du Maurier. I read My Cousin Rachel. I haven't read Rebecca, which is her most popular book, I guess. It's a gothic novel depicting an unnamed young woman who, she's unnamed throughout the whole book, who impetuously marries a wealthy widower before discovering that both he and his household are haunted by the memory of his late first wife, Rebecca. Woo! I love the ghost story. So yeah, I'm excited to read that one, especially because I loved her other book, so I gave it 5 stars. So I'm very confident that this one's going to be also a smash. Then we have Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, telling the story of a man who is cast away in an island for 14 years, I guess. Very similar to Castaway, the film with Tom Hanks. I think I know more or less the story of Robinson Crusoe, but it would be interesting to read the original material. Then next we have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, which is apparently it's a very depressing book written in 1963, and is following the story of Esther Greenwood, a bright and smart student who begins her experience as an intern in a very famous New York fashion magazine, and she experiences a mental breakdown, and it's about mental health, and it's really picturing the mental health that Sylvia Plath had when she was writing this book. I think it's her only novel. She wrote a lot of poetry and her diaries. Very excited to read that one. I think that's going to be a really hard read though. Then we have Brideshead Revisited by Evelyn Waugh, which is one of my friend's favorite classic, I would say, written in 1945, and describing the story of the aristocratic Flight family from the 20s through the Second World War. Very excited to read that one because apparently it was also a book that inspired the story of Saltburn, a film that I really loved on Amazon Prime. But yeah, very excited for that one. I think it's really high in my list at the moment. Then we have The Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, written in 1392. Which is, I think, my oldest book in this list. It's a collection of 24 stories who tell the story of different strangers on a different walk of life. I don't know much about it, but I'm very intimidated because it's an old novel, so let's see. Then we have The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, which is one of my favorite classics ever. I read it 2 years ago, written in 1941, a modern classic then, following the 2 days in the life of a 16-year-old Alden Caulfield, who's been expelled from his prep school and is wandering around New York. Very interesting story. Not much happened in this book, but the character is so deep, and I loved it. I have different edition of this book. I have this edition that I love, the Penguin original edition. But yeah, I want to reread this book because I would like to annotate this book at some point. Then we have The Color Purple by Alice Walker, written in 1982, which is a classic tale of Silly, a young black girl born into poverty and segregation. I'm wondering if there is any musical, any song like music in this book, because I think there were like a film that's been released not a long time ago on this story, so I'm very curious about that one too. Then we have The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, and it was written in 1846, and it's a classical revenge story. We're following the story of Edmond Dantes, who's been accused for a crime that he didn't commit it, and has been in jail for 14 years, following him on his journey to revenge when he get out of prison to get revenge on the free men who put him there. And it's one of the most adored French books ever. I'm so excited to read it. I think it's number one in my priority at the moment, so I really hope I can read it at least before summer. Then we have The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, written by Mark Auden in 2003. It's telling the story of a gifted boy called Christopher Boone. He investigates the killing of a dog, and in doing so has an adventure of self-discovery. So I think it's also a nice commentary about autism, and a very interesting book to read if you have any kid of adults who has autism in their life. I haven't read this book, but yeah, it's in my bookshelf, so I'm gonna try to read it as soon as possible, because I want to be able to understand certain behavior. Next, we have The Diary of Anne Frank by Anne Frank herself, written in 1947, and telling the story of a Jewish teenager who wrote a diary of families 2 years in hiding, so between 42 and 44, during the German occupation in the Netherlands in World War II. So I know that this is gonna be a really hard read. In France, we mainly read it at school. I've never read it though, but I know that it's very popular, and a lot of kids has to read that at primary school. Very, very curious to read that. Then we have The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. I love John Steinbeck. I read The Old and Mice, I don't remember the title exactly, and East of Eden, and I loved them both. In The Grapes of Wrath, with following the fictional journey of the Jode, a family of sharecroppers from Saliso, Oklahoma, forced to migrate west during the Dust Bowl. So it's really the migration of those Americans who are looking for a better life, the American dream, etc. So very excited. I know that Steinbeck is a very good storyteller, and I can't wait to get through this one as well. Then we have The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, written in 1925. I read that book already as well in French, so I'm worth a rereading on that one. I really enjoyed it. I remember one of my favorite read the year I read it. We're following the story of Jay Gatsby, who is a millionaire, and he's trying to he had a summer fling with like Daisy Buchanan, and he's trying to get her love back, and throwing this big party to get her attention. I really remember loving this one, so I'm very confident that that's gonna be a nice read while I get through it again. Okay, not many left. We have The Outsider by Albert Camus, who was written in 1942. I read this book last year, and I gave it 4 stars. I have really mixed feeling about this book. It's a classic existentialist novel, but for me that book was so frustrating because the lack of action of the main character too frustrating for me. I gave it 3 stars, but wouldn't recommend in general. Then we have The Picture of Dorian Gray by the one and only Oscar Wilde, written in 1890. So the story is basically Dorian Gray who asks his friend to paint a portrait of him and make a pact with the devil, where the portrait is getting older instead of him. So yeah, it's a Gothic novel, Victorian Gothic novel, and I think it's one of the only Oscar Wilde novel I read. I enjoyed it. It was so good, and I'm worth a reread as well because I want to annotate this book so much. Then we have The Quiet American by Graham Greene, written in 1955. The narratives follow the complex relationship between cynical British journalist Thomas Fowler and idealistic American Ed Walker Aidan Pyle, exploring their conflicting view on love, politics, and morality. I found that plot very boring. No filter. I mean, it's in this list, but I don't know when I'm gonna get through this one. Let me know if you read this book and you think that it's a good read. But at the moment, reading that plot, I'm like, meh. Then we have The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, written in 1875. And so this is the plot. The man chronicles the fleeting fame of Augustus Melmoth, a villainous financier of obscure origin who briefly captivates the aristocratic society of London with his image as a man of wealth and prestige. I'm really excited for that one. I think it reminds me of Bellamy and other books that I read, and I'm very, very curious to know how that man is able to do to just climb the ladder. Then we have The Wind in the Willow by Kenneth Grammer, and I love that one. It's a very cozy read. I think Todd was my favorite character. I know that it's very popular in Britain, less in France, I remember, because I think there is a cartoon in the 80s and the 90s that was really popular in Britain. But I really loved the story. I think it was cute. And as I said, Toad is the most entertaining character in this story. Then we have To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, written in 1960, so a modern classic again, and we're following the story of Atticus Finch, a lawyer who is defending a black who has been accused of raping a white woman. The book is written by the perspective of his kids, Atticus Finch kids. So I've seen the film, and I've seen also the play in the West End, and I loved it, so I know the story in general, but yeah, I need to get through the original material as well. Then we have Ulysses by James Joyce, from the Irish author James Joyce, written in 1920. The events of one day, June 16, 1904, in one smallish European city, Dublin, through mostly the consciousness of two men, Stephen Dedalus and Leopold Bloom. Looks very boring, but who knows? Maybe it's one of the most influential novel of all time. Who knows? I know one of my friends read it and wasn't really impressed with it, so I'm not really looking forward to it, but it's still in this list. Then we have War of the World by H.G. Wells, written in 1898, so very old. I didn't know that it was that as old, which is a science fiction novel, one of the earliest story of to detail a conflict between humankind and extraterrestrial race. I went to London to the War of the World experience. It was really interesting, and we were following the story through different activities and music. I really enjoyed it, so I really want to read that one. It's really high in my list too. And then last but not least, we have Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte that I read last year, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Written in 1847, the narrative center of the all-encompassing, passionate but intimately doomed love between Catherine and Heathcliff, and how this unresolved passion eventually destroyed them and the people around them. So it's a story of very despicable characters. There is no one character that I enjoyed, but yeah, a very dramatic story, Victorian, Gothic, whatever you want, but yeah, very enjoyable in a way. I mean, this was done on purpose to hate those characters, I guess. So these were the 50 books I would like to get through. As I said, I don't have a time limit. I would like to get through them as soon as possible, maybe 10 years, I don't know. I hope it gave you like some suggestions and recommendations. Let me know if you're excited to read any of them and which one I need to read next that are high in your list. They're mainly classic books, but I know that they would be very important and impacting read in my life as a reader, so very excited for that. If you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you're still here, please also think of following me on Instagram. So I created an account for this channel if you want to have more backstage information, and yeah, I'm very excited to start this journey and produce more content. If you enjoyed it, please leave a comment as well, and I see you very soon for another video. Bye.